Catus Maximus here, this time with a review of a Champion Plugmaster CT-405. Definitely know this is American made, forged in USA, patent pending. Patent pending because this is yet another New Britain ratchet. But I'm doubling up on these because I did one about shimming New Britain ratchets. To answer a question why I don't take a piece of the spiral ring and cut it to use it as a shim is because it fills in some of the undercut for this retaining ring. And many times fixing these loose anvils on these New Britain ratchets, it's because the anvil sits a little bit below the bottom of the shelf for the retaining ring. So if you cut off a piece of this, it uses up too much space, and many times you're not able to get a snap ring in on top of it, and it doesn't actually help, versus some kind of washer that's just the right size that can sit under it. The other thing I wanted to mention is, and I do in all these new ratchet videos that use internal retaining rings, is that you can replace the spiral one with regular snap rings. Regular snap rings tend to be just a touch thicker and they're even, and it makes it easier to service. A third thing I'm going to mention about these New Britain ratchets is that I've also noticed this fact, that if you have ones with this type of anvil without the shelf, they're a 44 tooth, and the ones with the shelf are a 60 tooth, a little bit finer, and that actually creates complications for shimming because you need a real special washer that just has a real thin brim around the edge. Anyway, more back to the Champion Plugmaster. I'm going to use a spark plug socket to demonstrate this because it would be illegal to use any other socket. This is only for plugs, spark plugs. And if you're not using this ratchet to change spark plugs, then you're certainly not a master and you're not a champion of your profession. That's all I gotta say. Actually, I think it's hilarious. So that Champion spark plugs, this must have been in the 70s, that they decided to have made by New Britain custom-made ratchets just for changing spark plugs. And it is unique in the New Britain world. Nice sturdy ball detent there. It's a semi-flex. It actually only flexes about 15 degrees up or down. And I was kind of curious. Either I thought, well, maybe, I mean, obviously it was intentional, but I thought maybe it was even a manufacturing mistake where they just put the hole too low in this. But I don't believe so. We find that the rivet is just an external rivet, but it's like there's a recess there, but not as much on this side. It kind of seems like it may have been a handle that used a different style pin or even a screw. But on this, they just used a real heavy-duty rivet that they swaged. But as far as the limited flex, I think the deal with that really is the fact that you just need a little bit of flex when you're trying to get at spark plugs, but it prevents the head from wanting to flop all the way over, creating a hassle when you're trying to get a socket on there and in hard-to-reach places, and you're having the head flop back, or you're trying to get inside and the head's flopping back. And so I think they just realized, and back when this was made, it was still mostly carbureted engines and V engines where you had lots more space to work than super tight cars these days, even though this is still valid today, of course. It's just for convenience, so it doesn't flop all the way over, so you can get the socket on or get the spark plug started with just a little bit more convenience. And that's about the best I can make of it, because it's pretty darn rare to see flex head ratchets that are only semi-flex. Anyway, let's go ahead and take this down just so you can see the internals. We'll remove this ring and I'll show you why there's an issue with me being able to fix this up besides just replacing the spiral ring with a snap ring. We'll just get in there and try to dig out the spiral ring. The thing with the spiral rings is you just got to find their starting edge, and you got to find like a pick. They usually have a little notch or something in them. This one does, and you just kind of got to get under that notch and battle it out. This one's kind of dirty too. And once you get it started, then you just run the screwdriver right around the ring, or once it is out, you just kind of pull and it just pops right on out of there. Get this mechanism out, and indeed, we have our New Britain ratchet. We can see that as opposed to this ratchet, with the USA ratchet I reviewed yesterday, 44 tooth, we can see on the 60 tooth that we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. We got 12 teeth on this. And of course, this is so, in my opinion, so much better than the SK design, because this is a big floating ball Lots of engagement area. I mean, just tons of teeth, huge amount of width, just lots of extra surface area. And the forces are being delivered straight onto the body of the anvil itself. It's a very strong mechanism. If it doesn't slip, then the only two things that can happen is the anvil shears or the head actually cracks and splits open, which I've heard of happening on New Britain ratchets, especially if you hit them with hammers or use cheater bars on them. But it kind of depends on the situation. But all that strengths, because like on a traditional SK design, you have a rocking pawl, and people have good luck with them, but they're just not as strong because that rocking pawl is pivoted on a pin that goes through, and that pin tends to be a lot smaller than the anvil, and it's what shears. I've actually taken part Napa ratchets and done videos on them where that's exactly what happened. The pin's sheared. And so that's why I really like this New Britain design, and the way this ratchet, this pawl is, the way it's floating, and how you reverse it is it has two pieces of sheet metal and they slide back and forth. I've also just learned just in my last video that the reason New Britain ratchets has such loose anvils is, one, the way since this pawl is floating, it can rock back and forth a little bit, so it can self-align to maintain good engagement. And since they have this unique mechanism where these two plates slide back and forth, they need good clearance, otherwise they'll bind up and it won't want to reverse. And finally, this is not a copied design. I don't believe any manufacturer makes anything like this now, just because of the expense. You have a lot of machine work on this anvil, not just because you have a groove, but you have an undercut, you have this post, which needs a little undercut, and then you have an E-clip, you have two custom stamp pieces of sheet metal, and then a very, very custom asymmetrical spring in there. And a little undercut for that to fit in, so it's just too expensive of a design. But it's really unfortunate. Let's take a look at the teeth. The teeth look pretty good inside this. Nice and well cut. Not too much wear. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and lube this up and get it back together and finish out this video. Should mention this design sure is nice once you get it cleaned up and lubed. Just such a definitive reverse mechanism. That's what I do like about these. These I've never even had a... Even when I've shimmed these, like even ratchets like this where I've shimmed them where they're just a bit too tight, New Britain ratchets absolutely do not self-reverse. That's for darn sure. And it may be because of the way this mechanism has a kind of an independent action. And two springs. One spring specifically just to deal with the reversing, and a second spring dedicated just for pushing that pawl out. And also, lastly, to mention why you need just the right washer. Like this one, which seems that it fits, actually doesn't quite fit. We can see that there's still a gap there, and that's because of this radius that's down here. So one of the challenges of shimming round head ratchets. And here we are at the end of another too long ratchet video. The snap ring helped a little bit, but there's still just a bit of play in here, and so eventually I'll have to wait till I collect up more washers or order a set of specific shim washers. But I have been able to get away with what I've collected so far. Actually, I want to correct myself. I was just talking about, just a second ago, about the snap ring being helping some. I found just a very slightly bigger snap ring, a little bit larger in diameter, but it turns out it was actually the next step up in thickness. The one I just had in here was 40 thousandths thick. This one was 10 thousandths thicker. It was 50 thousandths thick, and that actually made a huge difference. Now this anvil, this would be considered factory perfect. There's just a little bit more play than what the USA ratchet is, so there's no tight spots. But now this anvil's nice and thick. And it's also nice that the undercut, that groove, is actually pretty deep, obviously at least 50 thousandths wide, so it'd accept it. But there is one note. When this snap ring was basically just a little bit too big, you can see how the eyelets are actually even caught up a little bit on that taper. I couldn't even actually get the eyelets past this gap. I had to kind of put it in halfway and then press on those eyes pretty hard with a screwdriver to get them to pop in there. To get this out, I'm going to have to press on this and actually pry up the back, and then use the screwdriver to kind of yank it out. So it'll be difficult to remove it. But that's one of the reasons to get actual snap ring sets and collections of them, because they vary just an infinite number of sizes and thicknesses, and so you can just find the right one. So doing that here gave me everything I wanted. I don't need to shim this. This is perfectly tight. And now whenever I change spark plugs, I'll be using a Champion Plugmaster. So anyway, that's the review of this Champion. Sounds so much better now. Cleaned and lubed. Really do like New Britain's. It is my favorite round head ratchet design. Really, just getting close to peak round head. Even the modern Heartspring ones, I don't think are as good as the New Britain's. The New Britain's are just super reliable. Heartspring ratchets, I've heard about having the springs fatigue and break, which is unfortunate. Never seen a New Britain with any kind of fatigue springs. Put this spark plug socket back on because once again, this is a Champion Plugmaster. And I think the last thing, that is a strong detent. That socket is not going to get stuck on the end of the spark plug and come off the ratchet, that's for sure. The last thing to say is I think this makes 8 different brands. So far, I have found that New Britain has made that use the New Britain design. So we have New Britain, we have Pencraft, Husky, Mac, Blackhawk, that weird USA ratchet, the Champion Plugmaster, and Mustang. 8 different brands of ratchets that are all using essentially the same mechanism. I think that's kind of interesting. Anyway, I really appreciate everybody who's been watching and subscribing. And if you haven't subscribed, please do. Until next time, Catus Maximus out.